can see there's a group of us right now. And just to fill you in, what we're doing is we're going to be teaching the mind model of self-confidence versus confidence. And today, Blair's going to be working with a group. We've got Tim Irway down over here. We got Dwayne here. We got Scott down in the corner, and we got Aggie at the bottom. So that's our panelists for today, and they'll be helping us facilitate the lesson. So I'll hand it over to you, Blair.
Super. Thanks so much, Trevor. Super appreciate that. We got a great show for you tonight. Sorry, I always want to say that, but it's a great webinar. Man, self-confidence versus confidence. And I had such a great primer earlier today. It was a young lady that is frequently on these calls too. And she's been around and a student of mine for, gosh, at least 5 years. And met her in in Mexico, and profiled her then. And she bought the course, Rewiring Your Mind for Wealth, and applied the skill sets and completely, has done a major job of transforming her life. It's awesome to see. Like, it was so thrilling. But the really key thing here is, for us today, she really figured out how to begin the process, do more than just begin, but establish a way of viewing herself with a high degree of self-confidence in specific areas, which is one of the things that I see happen to people time and time again, where people have capped themselves out accidentally because they do apply the mind models in a specific way, but it's not consistent enough, and they don't know how to transfer it over to a different life situation. So that's one of the things I'm going to focus on this version of confidence versus self-confidence. Okay, so anybody care to share a story about where they're at with confidence versus self-confidence? How's it going for you? What's holding you stuck? What's holding you back? Where would you like to take yourself? And how would you like to move yourself to that next level? Or not even how would you, but where would you like to go? And I'll work at helping you get there tonight. Okay, right now. So anybody up for that? Do we have any volunteers?
Cool.
Scott.
Okay.
Go for it.
I will go. Well, over the last few years, I feel that my confidence levels have been coming down. I used to be instant expert. I could do anything, knew everything. But in the last few years, I've felt that myself dwindling and coming down. I need to rebuild and refocus so that I can.
Okay, so rebuild and refocus. What sort of, do you have any mind models in your mind right now that might help you do that? And the rest of you guys as panelists, other than you, Trevor, because I know you know this one, and everybody else can be able to jump on. Okay, so which mind model do you think you need to pay attention to in order to build or rebuild self-confidence?
Well, I'm not good with names, but basically I have to believe in myself.
Okay, I love this. Okay, sorry for interrupting.
No, but not judgment.
Okay, believe in yourself and not judge yourself. Okay, believing in yourself is going to be, believe it or not, really obvious here, a belief system, right? Does that make sense to you guys? Scott, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Aggie, it sounds reasonable. I got to believe in myself, right?
Yeah.
Well, tell me, anybody here, Tim included, how would you actually believe in yourself? How do you do that? Dwayne, what do you think?
I would say taking baby steps. Just start doing it. And
how do you start doing what to believe in yourself?
Moving forward, being in the now.
Being in the now, looking forward. and just going, I believe in myself. What if your first baby step is you tripping and falling and skinning your knee?
Get up and move again.
Get up and move again. And the second one is a trip and fall and skins your knee. What do you do then?
Get up and keep moving forward.
Well, right there at 2 fails in a row, almost, well, the average person will quit, because after 1.2 attempts, the average person stops trying any new thing that you put in front of them. They stop attempting. That's what an average person does. So you're asking yourself to be above average and go forward and just try stuff out and keep on going and doing it, because I believe in myself. Well, I've been writing a new ebook lately about mindset versus mind models. And this is one of the things that just, I'll be blunt, it just pisses me off, because this whole thing here of people going out and saying, just believe in yourself, just believe in yourself. It's like putting somebody in a pilot seat and some other coach with a headset on the ground where it's nice and safe is trying to say to you, you've never flown the aircraft, take it off, fine, and you can do this. I believe in you. I believe in you. You'll do fine. Just believe in yourself. You'll do fine. The odds are you're going to crash and burn. Okay? Like, I don't care what people say. Believing in yourself is a nice idea, but it doesn't work. It's not identifiable, it's not repeatable, and it sure as hell ain't duplicatable. But it sounds great when you're pumping somebody up. Believe in yourself. Okay? Let's break this stuff down to identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable stuff. Are you up for that? Scott, are you up for that?
Yeah, I'm up.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Angie, do you agree? Okay. Super. Okay, so what do you think? It's a mind model I've already taught. So what mind model might we need to go to?
Evaluation.
The one from last week.
Not exactly, because clutter versus clarity and not clarity, but complexity versus clutter is nice, but what we need is, Dwayne?
Evaluation versus judgment.
Right. What does that do?
Right.
What's evaluation and what's judgment?
Well, judgment's kind of based on, I don't know, like patterns that your parents may have instilled in your moral patterns or something like that. Whereas an evaluation, you actually take a look at the situation and see, was it effective or was it not effective? What might I do different?
Okay, I'm going to clean up that definition a little bit there. So the judgment piece, what you've said is correct. It's something that your parents have instilled, but more importantly, is this opinion or fact, Dwayne?
Opinion.
It's opinion based.
And it's negative in
it doesn't necessarily, like, the funny thing about this is it doesn't necessarily even have to be negative. It can be an opinion that's based on a positive, because we frequently have you ever felt like you were doing something and you felt like you got set up and for a success and you still failed?
Yes.
You were told a bunch of stuff that you thought would work and it just didn't?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Like, I recall you being on a couple of weeks ago and you sort of told me a background story there, like where it implied that you had stuff and you were supposed to do better or felt like you should have done better, but you didn't. And it didn't pan out for you. Like, the rug got pulled out from underneath you. Right. By the way, for those of you that are in MLMs, this is one of the common issues that people tell you, just believe in yourself or go out there and do it the way that it was done 20 years ago and it'll work because it worked for me. Well, no, life has changed, circumstances have changed. We have to update. Opinions are generally based on the past, usually based on experience, but not necessarily. in it can become like folklore, word of mouth passed down over time, over generations, about how things should be. Like if they should be a certain way, they ought to be a certain way, then that's fine. Okay, Scott. So the question here is, what part of this for evaluation do you understand? We're going to park judgment and we're going to try and focus on evaluation. So what part of this needs to focus on evaluation for you? And what are the traits that you need to focus on? Yeah.
Well, I need to focus on the ideas of what I can do and what I can do well, and be able to take that to the next level.
Okay, Tim, I'm going to pick on you. So Tim, what worked about what he just said, and what's gapped out in what he said?
So what worked was he did mention that he had to identify, you did mention you had to identify what was working for you, which definitely works. Where the gap is, and I'm not going to label it as effectively probably as you, Blair, but
that's gap, okay. I need you just to practice this.
Totally. Stuff. So the gap is there's no specificity in what that is. So what I'd ask you, and I'm sorry, your name again?
Scott.
So Scott, what specifically do you feel that you're confident at when you're doing it? What's a specific situation where you feel confident?
Well, when I'm writing code, I guess, when I'm writing the software that I have to write,
great.
I can feel confident then, but then you get into traps and
okay,
tough
hold on
situations that make you think you know nothing.
So you're confident when you're writing code. So situationally, when you're writing code, you're confident. You feel competent and confident in what you're doing. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. So what about that makes you feel confident?
My ability to see progress and actually be able to accomplish something.
Right. And so
anytime I gotta fill in everybody else who's listening, because you're doing a great job. You get to continue on here, Tim, in a second. I'm just going to fill everybody else in to please listen to Tim's precision questioning. So he's asking very precise questions to move Scott along. Now, Tim has a certain advantage here. He's a client of ours, and we've worked with him for months, so he knows this stuff, but he's getting a chance to actually practice and move it forward here tonight, again in a live situation, sort of semi-supervised by me. But if you screw up, I'll catch you, and I'll make sure Scott's not going to crash and burn no matter what. So you can't really do anything wrong. It might be slightly ineffective, but that can be fixed in a heartbeat. So anyway, so think about this one too, Dwayne. If you're listening for role modeling on how to question, or anybody else who's thinking about going forward in developing their skills with mind models, Tim is doing an awesome example of how to question using mind models. Okay, Tim, back to you.
Right on. And it was Doug, correct?
It's Scott.
Scott, sorry, there's Doug on here. Sorry, no, I apologize. All right, Scott. Oh, I see your name. Oh, there it is right there. Okay, perfect. Okay, I see your name. Fantastic. So Scott, when you're sitting down and you're coding, what are you working towards something? Do you have a result that you're going for when you're coding?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so what?
So looking for an outcome.
When you sat down, you were doing coding, you felt confident in that situation. What was the result that you were going for with that coding? What are you creating with your code?
Well, in this particular example, I was trying to, oh geez, I got to think of one now.
And excuse me, I want to ask, are you a professional coder? Is that what you do for work?
Yes, that's what I do for work.
So is this what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I work in day and night basis. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
So are you working for someone else? Or are you working for yourself? Are you a freelancer? How? Just share with me your situation. This doesn't really matter that much. I just want some context.
Yeah, I work freelance and I work for multiple companies at the same time.
Great.
I'm
So
also
people
on a
actually
service
they
desk.
invest in you to help them with coding, correct?
That's right.
Awesome. Okay,
Yep.
great. That
Coding
clarifies
and
for me.
support.
Thank you. Okay, awesome. So so are you working on specific projects when you're doing coding? Like, give me an example of a project you're working on.
Well, one of the projects I'm working on is a payroll system where we take some payroll statistics and then migrate them into another reporting system so that they can
Great.
be utilized by the professionals.
Got it. So you're retained, your services are retained, and you're being hired to complete this for a client. Is that true?
That's
and
right.
And
yeah.
they're investing in you to continue to do this work for them on an ongoing basis. Is that right? And so when
That's
you're
right.
coding, when you're
Yep.
delivering the result that you're being hired to deliver, do you feel confident in that situation to do that?
Generally speaking, yes.
Great.
There's just times when you hit the wall and then it gets dicey.
So let me ask you,
Okay.
Scott,
Okay.
do you think that it gets dicey and people hit the wall in pretty much any type of situation where they're learning new skills or performing their jobs or functions? I mean, is it reasonable
Agreed,
to expect that every one of us hits a wall?
I would think so.
Let me just share with you. I hit walls often.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: are you capable? Do you have the resources at your disposal to overcome that situation when you hit that wall? Go ahead, Blair.
Okay, perfect. You can answer this, but right after that, I want to jump in there. So, do you have the resources at your disposal?
I have to find them. I have to find the resources. I am only one person, and I don't have any backup.
Have you done that in the past? And as a resource, like resources are resources. So in the past, have you been able to problem solve this either with the help of other people or research or other resources that you've used in the past?
Yes, all the time.
Okay, now
I use
want to
mostly
break
the
into
internet.
this because I need to chunk this into a mind model that's identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable. Okay, so which mind model is Scott being processed through by Tim? Now, it hasn't been named and labeled yet, but it needs to be named and labeled so that it becomes identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable, because right now, all we're doing is reminding Scott of his potential ability to be successful. We're reinforcing a belief, not building a skill. Okay, so that's great. We've got sort of the grounds for building a skill, but we're not doing it because it's not identifiable, it's not repeatable necessarily, and it sure as heck ain't duplicatable because he can't transfer this type of knowledge to somebody else easily. Okay, so we got to break it back down. What makes this a mind model? Dwayne, what do you think that it makes? And then Aggie, what do you think that it makes? What makes this a mind model?
Are we talking about the questioning process that Tim just took him through?
Partially, but more importantly, the questioning process paired with Scott's answers. What part of that can we pull to build it into a mind model? Any idea?
The only thing I'm thinking of right now would be effective versus ineffective.
Bingo. That's perfect. I'm going to build on. Aggie, did you have another thought?
What I was thinking is that as Scott was talking, that what has he used before that was effective in his past that he can pull on right now to be able to use when he hits the wall.
Very well languaged, by the way. Extremely well languaged. So I'm going to start bridging the gap between what Dwayne said, you said, Aggie, and what Tim was doing. I'm going to bring all three of them together. Okay, first of all, You talked, Aggie, about it being effective. What did he do that was effective? What makes it effective is the fact that it's externally verifiable. Every question that Tim was asking was causing him to go outside of himself and not discover an opinion that he held or a viewpoint or anything else. It was all externally verifiable. Even if he was the only person to witness it, anybody else, if he had it videotaped or anything else done, it was completely externally verifiable. Because of Scott's story, Scott told us a story here, but that story means that he went outside of himself to find resources to figure out that problem. And that's where you were heading as well, Dwayne. So you were heading into externally verifiable, but more importantly, effective versus ineffective. Did this work? Effective versus ineffective is non-judgmental language, which means that it is what kind of language, Dwayne?
Evaluation.
It is evaluation style language or evaluative language. Okay, so the point of improvement for Tim is, and for everybody here, and Scott, you as well, is look for places where you can externally verify and confirm by validating it through evaluation. That's going to be the key player here, is evaluation language. So externally verifiable, it has to be externally verifiable. If it's not, it's internal and it's a judgment. It's not, is it an opinion? No, because another way to verify this, another test for it is it an opinion? It's not an opinion, it's a fact. How do we know facts from opinions? Opinions are 100% inside of us, whereas facts are, again, externally verifiable. It's not an opinion if it's a fact, okay? And the third thing here is effective versus ineffective. Tim, you did a very good job, more or less forcing Scott to recognize what he did that actually worked. Mm-hmm. And trapping him, but containing his mind. It's not really a trap, it's a container to say, hey, if you're going to keep on throwing out the things that you do that are effective, well, what's the point? Because you're not noticing your own successes. So
he was backpedaling at the point where he was going, well, but I hit a wall, and so that was backpedaling away from external. He was going internal.
And what do you know when he went internal? Judgment. Where was he going?
Judgment.
Bingo. Judgment. Perfect. I was going to say judgment or evaluation. It's 100% judgment. So can you build self-confidence on judgment? Scott, yes or no?
Can you build not Scott on judgment? No.
Self-confidence.
Can I build Scott on judgment?
You can spell.
No.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm a little stoked here. I think that this is perfect set of examples because it actually shows that when you are going along, you have that sense of self-confidence, and then all of a sudden you flip into judgment and you start undermining yourself.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I feel I'm supposed to be professional in this area.
Exactly. Right? But if you don't name and label
everything.
Right. But if you don't name and label what it is that you're doing to yourself, how do you stop it? How do you notice that it's not working, or if it is working? Yeah, all you get is this tank and you've missed the tripwire event. And that's really what Tim caught for you. When you started backpedaling, the moment you started backpedaling, Tim was on you. Like white on rice.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, he was on you. And then that is the moment of the change of the language pattern. That was the moment when you started going, I'm going to flip. You didn't say this out loud, but back somewhere in your brain, it says, well, I was, evaluating myself just fine here. Oh, it's time to whip out judgment and put myself down and make myself feel like crap. Okay, how come I'm going to do that? Well, it's just a habit pattern and it seems comfortable, it seems safe, and I know how to handle crappy situations because I've practiced it so much. I might as well put myself into one here and just go after more crappy situations. How come? Because I'm really good at handling crappy situations. Okay? And that's what we do to ourselves frequently when we don't take time to consciously self-evaluate. Okay? So we've got to raise it to that conscious point. So, Tim, what's the tipping point for you for a point of improvement in your skill set?
Maybe getting a little bit quicker at getting him to evaluate when he starts to slip. So I'd interrupt that quicker and ask him to externally verify what is working for him. So as soon as he starts slipping back,
simplify that one step. That would be the second step that I do. The first step that I do is get him to name and label.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay, because the number one thing that we have to do is name and label ourselves till we habituate these things. And once we've habituated, right, am I evaluating? Am I judging myself?
So it's essentially what you just did with Scott, which is where you said, hey, are you in judgment or evaluation?
Right.
Right.
I got to get him practicing so he knows his trigger point.
Right.
Scott, you listening?
And Scott, how much more is which is more effective for you, do you think? Being in judgment or being in evaluation? When we were just having that conversation just now.
Definitely evaluation.
Great.
That's the correct answer.
But
right?
I want you to take notice.
It is. However, what do you feel it to be? What do you know it to be? And what can you externally verify to confirm that it is? I want you to feel it, hear it, feel it, know it, see it, do it. No.
Yeah, I think when Tim was...
Give me, what do you see or feel inside of yourself that you know this is correct?
I feel a strength when I hear the word evaluate. When Tim
that's good enough.
Got me to switch gears.
Right. How do you know? How do you know? Feel
it just kind of hits you.
Yeah. How does it?
You just kind of feel confident once you got there.
Right. You do. You feel confident. In fact, self-confidence, because you've actually begun that process of self-evaluation. You're not pretending to evaluate. You are evaluating. This is not a guess. This isn't random. This is, in fact, what you're doing in your brain. Correct or not?
Yes, it's correct.
Yeah, it is correct.
You hear it. You feel it.
Right. And you see the result, like we see the result externally, because the tone of your voice goes up. It becomes firmer. And I'm almost yelling at you. Okay, I'm being very passionate towards you. And you're not crumpling. You're actually sitting up straighter, telling me what the true goods are, like how you actually are. That's a self-confident guy. Not a guy that's, oh God, oh my God, it's all screwing up and woe is me and life is crap and whatever.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Where does the predicting of the outcome, where does that come in to play during this process where you can predict the outcome?
It's not about predicting outcome. It's about testing for the outcome. So
it's basically what I was doing with Scott when I was talking to him. I don't know the outcome. I know how to ask questions, and I know how to get Scott to evaluate by asking effective questions. I don't know if that question is going to work, but I can test. And if that doesn't work, I can test another question. So all I'm doing is testing, but I don't know the specific outcome, but my result is to help Scott get resourceful and identify where he's confident and identify it and be able to feel it, see it, and be able to say, okay, well, maybe I can do this predictably. And so this is the process that Blair's taken us through with confidence.
Hang on. You've just used the word that I was going to look up to make sure. Have we done process versus content? I believe we have. Right?
Yeah, maybe a long time ago.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant, okay. With
you did. Yeah, you've taken it, Tim. That doesn't count. It's for everybody else on Facebook and in here tonight. Like, yes, it's process. And I mean, honest to God, it's a flow. So you cannot know for a fact what the predictability of the outcome is not high necessarily. Sometimes it is, because you see where it's going and you know that person's language pattern and behaviors, and it's probable. But at the end of the day here, what you wind up doing is you wind up putting people through a process, and you know that process will turn out one of two ways. It'll be effective or it'll be ineffective. Either way, you've created a win for yourself. And that's the difference between mind models and mindset. Mindset is you try and do stuff and you hope that your mindset works and you believe in yourself. And if it fails, damn, you're like, throw your hands up in the air. What the hell do I do now? Because my mindset didn't work for me. Well, here, if it works, great. You can build on what's working and make incremental improvements even on what you were successful on. In fact, I've got a whole lot of stuff on that, where building on your own success is the only way to get your strength stronger. And that's where really superstars are born, is by building on strengths, not building on weaknesses, because all you'll do if you have super time and effort put in on weaknesses, all you get is average results at the end of the day, because it's not your inherent strength. So build on your strengths, get your weaknesses up to a passable area, or avoid them. Like, hand them off to other people, delegate them, do something that you're good to great at, and you'll become spectacular. But that's the way to supercharge your life. That's the way to become excellent at things, where you keep on testing 20% of the time, and 80% of the time you do stuff that's very good. 80% of the time, 20% spent on testing, and you get phenomenal results. Phenomenal results. Does that make sense? Aggie, what are you pulling from this so far? Give an update. There you go.
The questioning, when you use a questioning model, you are able to get exactly how the person is centered. Where are they connecting from as they answer you back?
Yes.
Whether are they certain or with their answer, or they're wavering with when
it doesn't actually matter if they're certain or if they're wavering in their answer. Really makes no difference. It's the fact that they're thinking it through, and they need to figure out, is this externally verifiable? And so your job is to, if you're wavering, is to find evidence that is externally verifiable to say, yes, this is true, or no, this is false. It doesn't matter what the answer is, because if it's false, where do I go to find something now that is effective? That is effective. So you can take, it's like, that whole saying about, what's his face? Edison, Thomas Edison, was told us that, he made 9,999 mistakes before he found the one thing that actually worked when he was making a light bulb. Well, hence the term light bulb moment. The bottom line here is we can fail effectively, and it's called failing fast, falling forward. That's one of my other mind models. It's fail quickly, falling forward. So failing fast, falling forward works. And that's what successful people do all day long, every day. They just make small mistakes, and they incrementally adjust and find out how to externally verify whether or not it worked or not. And if it didn't work, what's one thing that they can change to test again, to put that in the mix and test that out. And they keep on testing and testing and testing until they figure it out. And over time, you build up properties of what am I looking for? What doesn't work? I want to stay away from these things. So if I'm making a light bulb and I use, silk threads that go up in smoke in a split second, or cotton that pops and whatever. And then the idea was, well, what if we burn the cotton thread first and actually turn it into carbon? Well, that was something that didn't go up in smoke because it's already burnt. Number one. Number two, we've got to remove the oxygen so things don't burn. So let's get a vacuum in there and take out the oxygen. And those two things combined, and poof, they had a light bulb. Sure, it only burned for a couple of minutes, but what other things can get white hot and not burn when we remove oxygen? Well, tungsten, and there's a number of other metals that will meet that requirement. But the point is that he needed to figure it out from his failures. What are these components that are likely there, and test by removing them or adding one at a time, and you figure things out. The most complex problems are figured out that way. I was just watching before I got on the show, the webinar tonight, was the thing about that it took 50 years of development in order to build the first Harrier jump jet, the first vertical takeoff and landing military plane that worked. It wasn't the very first, but it was the first practical military aircraft that was vertical landing and takeoff. And how do you do that? Well, a lot of trial and error. And you notice what the differences are and how to balance a plane on jets of air. Never been thought of before, but it took 50 years to develop it. And it takes that kind of effort. Well, right now, I'm giving you mind models that work. All you have to do is figure out where to apply them. And we're trying to give you experiences here on the Blair Dunkley experience so that you can actually show up and say, oh, right, this is the kind of stuff that I could try out in different situations. Like with Scott, he's sliding down. Well, how do you stop the slide, Scott? How do you do that now?
Evaluate.
One word and 100% answer. Evaluate.
And how do you know when you're evaluating?
Perfect. Even better, Tim. Well done.
When you're not making judgments.
Right.
How do you know the difference? What are the principles? What are the fundamental differences?
Fact and opinion.
Right. And where do facts live? And where does opinion live? Scott.
Facts are externally verifiable.
The weird thing about facts
are self.
Right, internal.
Judgment.
Internal and judgment, yes, but internal. Facts are 100% of the time externally verifiable. 100% of the time. No variance ever under any circumstance. Okay? Opinions can never be externally verified. You can share your opinion. You can try and talk other people into sharing your opinion, but that's not an observable thing. That's you convincing somebody else to share your opinion. That's very different than a fact where you say, okay, run out there, tell me if it's light outside or dark. Well, depending on what part of the world you're from, you'll see where the sun is in the sky and you'll be able to make that determination. And so will everybody around you be able to basically agree on the same thing. That's the whole thing about externally verifiable facts, that they can be identified en masse, fundamentally the same way amongst groups of people, regardless of their belief. By the way, this is the big thing that hit me when I was developing mind models was it has nothing to do with what you believe. It's externally verifiable. You test and you evaluate. And when you test and you evaluate and it's truly externally verifiable, everybody around you will basically agree.
Hey, Blair, TJ just mentioned that he's got to hop off at 10, so in a few minutes.
No problem, TJ. Thanks so much for...
Yeah, this is fun.
Before he goes.
Yeah. So any closing words? Yeah, you got 3 minutes.
Thanks, Tim.
So the only thing I'll say is in the past when I've felt not confident, lack of confidence. When I felt stuck was the times when I would do things and that used to work and then they no longer work. So an example, back in the day before I met Blair, I would do promotions. In these promotions, when I first started doing them, I was following a model that worked really well. And I continued to follow the model, beat the drum, do it over and over, and it got less and less and less effective. And I didn't know how to fix it. So I got less confidence. I was less confident in myself because I was doing something that should work and it wasn't working. What was I missing? What was I forgetting to do? Scott. I keep saying Doug. What wasn't I doing?
Oh, you forgot to evaluate.
I forgot to evaluate. Exactly.
Having an opinion of yourself.
Right.
Yeah,
so
evaluate.
So just real quick, just kudos and thanks and props. I can never give enough gratitude to Blair, but this was 2011. So when Blair and Melissa shared with me IBER, which you probably have heard in the past, maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, then you will. When they shared that concept with me, IBER or IBR, that changed everything for me. And guess what the E stands for?
Evaluate.
Evaluate, exactly. So I want this result, and my intention is to get to this result. So I have to take behaviors, and each time I take a behavior, I have to evaluate and see what worked, what didn't work, what might I change, or what might I do differently. And as I ask those questions, I become incrementally better every single time. So I could take that old model that didn't work, and I could go, okay, what about that did work? Instead of throwing everything out and going, nothing works, this sucks, I suck, I have no confidence, then I can go, well, what about it did work? And when I started to pull those nuggets out of what was working, and I looked at what wasn't working, and I tested different things, I started getting better results. And guess what happened to my confidence? It went up. And not only did my confidence go up, but my self-confidence went up, because I knew that it wasn't the model that was effective. It was effective, but I knew that I had the power within to be able to replicate, duplicate consistently, predictably, and get a better and better outcome every time in every situation. So that was what this model that Blair's sharing with you. We kind of went down with the evaluation. Yeah, it's never one thing. It starts with confidence versus self-confidence, and then it's because they all come together like puzzle pieces.
They do.
And judgment versus evaluation. All this stuff.
It's stacking, and we stack mind models. Yeah. And that stacking of mind models gives us the leverage. We don't have quite enough. Well, you've sort of gone ahead and shared a IBER, which is fine, no problem there whatsoever. But we got to get people enough skills so that they can actually identify the behaviors as behaviors. And today, confidence versus self-confidence is the first thing. It's an outcome using previous behaviors or skill sets, mind models that have been taught. And we have two key ones. First of all, we have to have evaluation versus judgment. And the second one is we have to have effective versus ineffective. And both of those focus on externally verifiable factors and our language patterns so we don't trip up and fall into self-judgment. Anyway, I really want to thank you so much. I know you got to run. And Tim, it was awesome having you on.
Awesome being here, guys. And it's good to see some VIPs and Fast Track Aggie. Good to see you. I didn't even recognize you at first. Your background's really, really dark. And then I saw Aggie down there when I finally figured out where names are. So yeah, hope you're doing awesome. All right, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming, TJ.
Thank you so much. Well done. Really good work.
Thank you.
All right. So we have these fundamental pieces here. And the fundamental piece, oh, hey, sorry, I just glanced up at our panelists, and there's April. Hey, April, thanks for joining us today. Just shout out there. So awesome that you could make it on today. That's huge. Anyway, so confidence versus self-confidence. We now see that difference, and we start recognizing this. Now, I promised you guys that as you go along with self-confidence, what causes us to trip up, so that sometimes we have self-confidence and other times we don't. So best guess, I'm going to start with Aggie. Best guess. What causes us to sometimes have self-confidence and other times to not have self-confidence?
Our beliefs. If you are now, I mean, I know if I can just refer back to myself, with my belief of defining who I am, if for some reason I'm in a situation and I'm unsure of who I am and what I believe in, that's where my self-confidence sort of dwindles.
Yes. Now, that lack of being sure of yourself, that is based on an internal belief, correct?
Yes.
So that internal belief starts creating these flip-flop scenarios in ourselves, and that can be triggered by people that we hold in high esteem, and they give us negative feedback, so we doubt ourselves.
Yes.
Okay, you agree with that. It can also be in situations where we expect ourselves to be effective and successful and we are not.
Yes.
That can trip us up too.
Mm-hmm.
And Scott's nodding his head yes, because that's exactly one of the scenarios that you find yourself in. And that was one of the scenarios that Tim just said, you know, as well. And that can take self-confidence and blow it out of the water and doing that whole piece. You got to remember, self-confidence is you self-identifying your own successful use of skills, attitudes, and behaviors. Confidence is others identifying your successful use of skills, attitudes, and behaviors. This is critical that you guys get this definitional difference. I'll say it again, write it down if you have to. But self-confidence is you self-identifying your own successful use of skills, attitudes, and behaviors. You got to identify it yourself. You got to know what it is. You have to have the skills, the presence of mind to actually break it down and see what you're doing that's actually working. The next thing is confidence is others identifying your successful use of skills, attitudes, and behaviors. Okay, now, what makes these subtle self and others are really the only two words that are changed there, but it's huge, the impact that it has. Because if you place others as more important, their opinion as more important than your own, and at certain times in your life, that is important. Don't get me wrong here. So as we're growing up, and before we're adults, even as young children, some young children are brought up in households where they're taught how to make decisions on their own, how to evaluate themselves, how to make determinations and decisions, and be able to determine if they were effective or not. Others are not. Others are brought up in the area where they're basically told what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, and they wait for somebody else to tell them. And sometimes it's schools that do that, and right up to businesses and bosses, okay? But individuals who were fortunate enough to be brought up where they can make these decisions from a fairly young age tend to have higher senses of self-confidence, and it's more robust until life knocks them down, because if they don't have this knowledge of what the difference is between self-confidence and confidence, it's hard to build back up. And it's these simple little definitions that are behavior patterns, language patterns and behavior patterns that change us, make us more effective or less effective. And just mapping these out is what I did to develop and discover mind models. So basically that's all that it is. But it's taking natural behaviors that everybody does, observing what they are, and then documenting them. That's how mind models came about. But the bottom line to this one here is others. If you have others, and you have to start off with, as you're in the maturation process, the maturing process, you wind up relying on others, relying on your parents, relying on your teachers, relying on people you look up to for giving you good, credible advice and information, and telling you when you've done a good job. A coach on a sport team, tells you, you did great, you did great. Well, all of that's wonderful, but you got to know what you did that you did great, so that you can break it out and determine that difference. Tends to happen in sport more frequently, but sometimes parents, sometimes teachers actually break this out so that you can learn how to evaluate yourself, because you're actually being evaluated. You're not being judged. But then other people have the experience of, that's bad, you're wrong, or that was great, but no explanation about what made it effective. It's just good, bad, right or wrong, or great or terrible, or, you're stupid and dumb, or you're brilliant, or whatever. And people get their head size going in and out all their life, and they just lack that sense of balance and sense of self-confidence. But you learn the skill set here today of self-confidence, and you start with evaluation so that it's always externally verifiable. Now, certain times you go in here, before, and you wind up getting to a specific level of self-confidence where you're getting up to a certain area. Like, let's say you've got a great employer, and that employer sort of gives you free rein. You're not being micromanaged and everything else. So you have to make decisions, and you get feedback about, this is more effective than that. This was, preferred, and for this and this and this externally verifiable reason and the consequence and the actions that you took work in this scenario. This one didn't work because of this and this and this and this. And you go, oh, great, I now know what not to do. And the opposite of it is also true, because I now know what to do. I can build on that myself, because now I can take that information and go, right, this is effective. This is ineffective. I know what works. I know what doesn't work. I'm going to do more of what works and test out to see if I can't expand and find more of those spots. Now, confidence is when other people tell you this stuff and tell you, man, you're doing a wonderful job, Blair. That's amazing. You're doing great work. And then somebody comes along and says that I also look up to, and I go, and they go, yeah, you do really good work, except in this area. And it's like, boom, the rug gets pulled out from underneath me. So I go, oh my God, that's terrible. I mean, some of the feedback I've received, from people on Facebook, people I don't know, but are telling me, oh, you should be speaking, take, what's that club where they talk about speaking?
Toastmasters?
Toastmasters, right. Toastmasters. Anyway, I was actually at a Toastmasters International Conference, and I won an award for my speaking. I can do that stuff in Toastmasters, but that's not the point of doing this. I'm attempting to create an experience, not a lecture. Okay, so the model here is very different. I was also at NES, as you guys, most of you guys who were there saw me up on stage, not blowing my own horn, just stating facts here, is I was tied for #1 speaker out of the entire conference with Kurt Malley. Both of us won #1 spot for best speakers. So it was great, externally verifiable facts. So I can do it when I want, but I also choose to do it differently in different situations. I don't take that feedback as negative. That's somebody else's point of view, but that's how I evaluate it. I go, hold it. What is my intention here on the Blair Dunkley experience? It is to create an experience. It's not to give a lecture. And that's very different. So I want that experience to transfer out and go forward and make the difference. Now, that's about confidence, actually, it's about self-confidence, where I was going to do a pop quiz. Which one is it? But it was pretty obvious.
Too late for that. You gave the answers.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I would have known it anyway.
So you guys know the difference. So it is
ask or tell.
So yeah, you're giving away the answers, Blair. Right. Okay. That's a highly effective. No, it's not. Highly ineffective when I want to do a pop quiz. Anyway, my point being here is real simple. Is it doesn't diminish me when I make a mistake like that. I go, okay, that just happened. Next. And move forward. And you just go on. And in fact, if anything, it's funny. It's a little bit of humor that I can laugh at myself around, and I don't feel diminished. So that's really effective for me. And I move up the ladder and I go, what else might I do? Well, lots of things, because I'm new at this stuff, getting stuff out in webinars. So what do I want to do? I want to tighten things up. So I want to keep the time down, because I know that time is precious for everybody, and I don't want to be keeping up having 2 and 3 hour long webinars. I want to try and tighten this up. So with that said, that's one of the things I evaluated myself on. One of the things I wanted to do was go around here with everybody else on the call here tonight as paddlists and find out from you what specifically worked. What didn't work, and what's a point of improvement you might now make in your life regarding confidence versus self-confidence. Okay. Dwayne, I'm going to pick on you first. And then Scott, and then Aggie.
Well, I like the fact that you talked about how everything needs to be externally verifiable. I think it will help alleviate the trash talk inside the head. Because I know that I experienced a lot of that. I was just at a conference in Atlanta, little guru group or whatever you want to call it. And that was some of the stuff that we went into, was finding out that we actually know more than what we give ourselves credit for. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, the being able and learning some of these models, it's really starting to become effective with me, learning how to take what I know, put it down in front of me, and then decide or determine, is this going to be effective, or is this going to be effective right now?
I love your language switch right there. Decide to determine. Very similar words, but very big difference on how that affects your brain. So determine is almost always externally verifiable determinations. Deciding is very internal. Just sharing that point of interest. So well done, Dwayne. Okay, Scott, you're up. Sorry, Dwayne, were you done there? I noticed you're making notes, but
making notes on the determination.
Yep.
Deciding.
Exactly. Okay, cool. Okay, Scott, you're up.
Okay, looking for the external verifiable stuff and getting that sorted out so that I can, move forward and not dwell on the failures or whatever they are.
Okay, let's work on that language pattern right there. Okay, can we work on that, how you just language that?
Sure.
Great. So working on what's effective, and then you went into failures. Right. Well, failure is a judgmental word. So let's bring that to ineffective. So try working on what's effective and removing what's ineffective, and see how that feels when you say that. Just say it.
Okay. Well, we're going to work on the effective and remove the ineffective.
And now how does that feel when you say that? That was excellent, but how does that feel when you say that? Better. Yeah, it's less.
It feels the F word isn't there, and it's it puts it more in perspective and more in my own empowerment.
Exactly. That's one of the weird things about the mind model here of evaluation versus judgment. You language, and internal versus external. You language things to keep them on the outside. You don't personalize it because it's not about you. Your behaviors are like this t-shirt of mine. I can change it, okay, and put on a fresh one, a different one. I can put on a long sleeve shirt, a short sleeve shirt. It doesn't matter. I can change it. It's like a behavior. But if it's me,
right?
If I've failed, I now take on full responsibility and I'm to blame. Rather than I'm to change, I have to deal with all of this negative emotional stuff that I'm loading on myself. And instead of taking it on in the first place, just don't take it on by changing the language, because it's not about blame.
Right.
It's about seeing what you can do to be more effective and remove those things that are ineffective. That's really all that it's about. And I've worked with quite a number of, sorry, say that one again, Scott.
Get rid of the blame.
It's not a blame game. Success is not a blame game. You know, that's really important. And one of the weird things that I've noticed from lots of my super successful clients, like one of the guys that I worked with briefly was a gentleman that was one of the top 500. His company was one of the top 500 fastest growing companies in the US. And he had this really interesting habit. I'd see him not that many times, like not that often, but he would come out to these birthday parties that a friend of mine put on, and he would share all of these things that he's doing and talk about what his successes are. And he'd talk about like 6 or 7 things that he's focused on doing. And then next year he'd come back and he'd share about 2 or 3 of those things that were like uber successful. And then, 3 to 5 more things that he was working on this year. And I remembered some of those cool things that he was talking about from the year before. And I would ask him, and he would say, "Now that was nothing. That was irrelevant." Like, successful people take the lessons that they learned from the things that didn't work in their life, that were ineffective. They learn their lessons, but they flush the emotion, the negative emotion around that, and move on very, very quickly. They don't hang on to losses, like mentally. They just move on to what else can I learn from this, and then let the rest of that go, take the lesson and move forward. So I thought that was a cool lesson to learn from him. Okay?
Yeah.
Anything not working for you here on tonight's call?
No.
Okay. Cool. Great. Aggie, you're
all
up.
Working.
Good. What worked for you tonight, Aggie?
What worked for me is more of learning evaluation of what happened to me recently, that I had feedback from someone that I regard as authority or maybe as much more knowledgeable than me. And they gave me negative feedback that I'm supposed to be at a different level than what I was at that point in time. Yes, it did knock my confidence at some stage, and then I started doubting myself to say, okay, I should be at that level and I'm not. But what I did is I went back and I said, okay, fine. What I acknowledge the fact that I am not at that level, and taking responsibility that I should be at a different level. But at the moment, this is my data. This is where I am. This is what I've done. So I use evaluation and I said, okay, what can I do differently to change my results so I don't have to be in that place again whereby I am not, I'm not giving the results that or maybe give different results than what I gave now. So I went back, instead of feeling down in the dumps, like I did dwindle and I felt like that, but I went back to say, okay, now I started evaluating instead of judging myself, because when I was in the judgmental mode, I was like saying, oh, I suck. You know, I'm not at that level that this person that is highly maybe thinking of me, and I'm not bringing the results to the table. I started evaluating to say, okay, what did I do? You know, I started using that model to say, okay, what is it that I've done that was not right? And then I said, okay, what worked out of that? And then I took out what worked, that, okay, this is what I've been doing and it worked. And then I went back and I said, okay, what is not working? I realized that I spent more time studying, like you were saying, you spend more time studying instead of applying.
Yep.
So I came back to say, okay, what can I do differently to change my results? So I said, okay, now instead of just studying or just learning, I'll learn and apply, and I will now start something else that will give me results rather than doing what is not giving me results.
Perfect. Like that was awesome. And you did all of that, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's beautiful. That's like, you know what? When you know the mind models, like the way that you just laid that out there, Aggie, it's like spot on perfect. And how did you feel at the end of that? Like you were in charge, or what was your feelings? What did you feel like?
After making the decisions, I felt in charge, that, okay, now I know where I'm going.
Exactly. And before that, what did you feel?
Before that, when I was still feeling sorry for myself, and that I was unsure, my confidence was knocked. So I was less self-confident.
Yes. And just by working through that language pattern that we went through a couple of weeks ago now, the 3 magic words, and then the last week, that complexity versus clutter, cleaning up your mind, and now getting into, you know, confidence versus self-confidence. Do you notice how you actually just get that benefit of feeling more self-confidence? Like it just works. Is that what you've experienced here? It working for you?
Yes.
Super. I can't thank you enough for what you just shared, because you just laid it out step by step, what you actually did, how it worked for you, what worked, and the results you got, which is a boost in self-confidence and the desire to keep on working on things and making things work for you. It's huge. This is like huge. So super good job. Now, the last area that I want to cover off here, and I will just give Trevor a bit of heads up here. I'm not going to be using the panelists for this. I'm just going to be sharing the topic, what causes people to stay stuck at a certain level, like self-confidence below, and then they flip into confidence or the lack thereof. So if you want to bring the rest of the panelists back down to participant mode, that would be super, because I'm not going to be involving them in this. So take care, guys. Thanks so much for Aggie. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you. Really appreciate you guys on the call this evening. It's been huge and awesome. So thanks so much. So as I promised, I want to build in this one more time, one more level of game, as it were, and pay attention to, okay, as people gain a level of self-confidence, they externally verify what's going on, and it's externally verifiable. They evaluate it. They know that what they've done well. Now, the tripping point, that tipping point, as I've implied and sort of stated before, but I want to make it explicit here, is others and situations can cause us to stop self-evaluating. We take the evaluations or the comments of other people around us, and we make them more important than ourselves. The second you do that, you've given your power away to somebody else, and it's not about a power play. They didn't take it, you gave it away. And the only way to pull that back is for you to bring yourself back to evaluate their comment. That's the trick here. I didn't share this before. You have to evaluate their comment to you. And when you evaluate their comment, you look for, is it externally verifiable? Or is it an opinion? If it's their opinion, it might be valid to listen to it from their experience. If they have given you reliable, good information in the past, that's great. But it still needs to be tested for in your life, your way. You have to get externally verifiable data. It might be a good place to catalog this, to put this in the back burner. And for me in my life, what I've chosen to do is when I get random feedback, like the feedback that I got from somebody off Facebook, which said, Blair, you might want to take lessons from Toastmasters. Well, thank you. I won awards from Toastmasters, so I can do it when I want. Different reason. But what is the point of doing that? Is there a valid point that I can still take and externally verify? Well, short answer is yes, there is. The information is not as condensed as it needs to be. I need to tighten up the presentation time. I need to tighten up the process. Although the feedback may not be valuable the way that it is, can I find something in that negative feedback and not make a judgment and say that's bad? It's what part of that message is still effective. What can I do about it? Go to Toastmasters? Nah, not quite. But I think what he's getting at is this thing that I've noticed is from Toastmasters is keep your talk concise. Have my webinars been concise? Not as concise as I can make them. So maybe tighten them up. That's my lesson. But that's me giving me that from an external source who gave me a judgment. I can now evaluate it and go, oh, okay, that is got a negative something in there, and it doesn't match up with my experience of myself with Toastmasters. So what else can I pull from that? So I want to learn from every situation where anybody's willing to give me information. I want to try and pull positives from that as best I can. In some situations where you get haters on that just say, all of this stuff is crap, you don't know your ass from your elbow, basically. And you go, okay, fine. Park it, put that in the garbage and see if I get more stuff like that, or file it under G4 garbage. But I file it there to see, am I going down a path where I'm getting more of this stuff, or is it random? And after a while, I just throw it away. I just empty the trash because it's not worth saving. It's not a valid, I can't find other data points that support that point of view. And that's the critical difference. I'm not looking for the one-offs. I'm looking for the patterns that I am effective or ineffective, because if I'm effective, I want to build on that more. And if I'm ineffective, I want to change that. I get to win both ways. Where else do you get to have a win and build on your wins, and a failure and turn it into a win and make it even more effective? So that's simply because I'm taking that thing that most people would call a failure and going, hey, that's just not effective for me. That's ineffective. That doesn't work. What might I do to change it? Well, like changing a behavior is like changing clothes. I can try something new on and see if that's more effective. So that's it. That's the nugget right there that I wanted to share. And when you hit that ceiling, you're probably buying into somebody else or some other situation where you're taking that judgment. You're not seeing it in your mind. You're not naming and labeling it as a self-evaluation. You're not self-evaluating. In fact, it's not even an evaluation. It's a judgment, but you haven't named and labeled it. That's how come naming and labeling things is so powerful and so, so important. The more effective you can get at naming and labeling it, the faster you can apply these changes to yourself in your life. Okay, that's it for this mind model this week. Do we have any volunteers? Hey, Trevor, sorry, I should have asked. Do you have any other comments on that?
No, I think that sums it up pretty good. There were a couple comments there on the side. We got April and John going back and forth talking about some things, but yeah, we can move into profiling. If there was anybody that wanted to get profiled, I think almost everybody that's still here has been profiled at some point, except for maybe Raymond. So if anybody wants to be profiled, basically what happens, you come on and Blair will talk to you for a few seconds, ask you to tell him a little bit about yourself, and he'll profile you based on your language pattern. And he's going to recognize where some of your gaps are, as well as some of your strengths, and which mind models that you use effectively and ineffectively. And it can be a very illuminating experience to find out what you might be able to work on to improve. So if you haven't done that before and you'd like to give it a shot, just raise your hand and we will bring you on as a panelist and Blair will profile you.
Absolutely. Super. And if nobody raises their hand shortly, we're going to wrap it up for this evening. And I get to keep it down to an hour and a half tonight, which is going to be a new record for me.
I think we actually did have one that was under an hour and a half when you were.
Yeah, I know. I was sort of teasing with that. Yes, Trevor is going to Austin as well. Yeah. So, yeah, Dwayne.
Okay.
Raymond says, not tonight, soon. No worries, no worries. Not forcing anybody to do anything.
As Lisa, have you been profiled, Lisa? I feel like you might have been.
And April Chang just got a personal profile, jumped on the website and bought a profile, and I did that with her today. And it was super great to have April on and doing that profile. I profiled her about 5 years ago, 4, 5, or 6 years ago, somewhere in that range. When I was down in Mexico speaking at an Awesomeness Fest conference down there, and had a chance to profile her with my wife, Melissa, who also profiles. We both do profiling. And it was great seeing the update with April. And by the way, April, Melissa remembered you easily, even just from mentioning the name, and said, didn't we profile her before somewhere? And, and I said, yes, in Mexico at Awesomeness Fest. And she definitely remembered you too. So anyway, just to share with that. Not yet, in 2 weeks, because I'm out of town next week. That's Lisa. Okay, so I guess we're done. I just want to thank everybody, especially our participants one more time, and Tim for being able to jump on and get all the lessons and do his best, which was very good. And just tweaking that a little bit to make it more specific. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for people to jump on here and learn. Anyway, just
awesome.
It would be great. So,
well, thanks for coming out, guys, and we'll see you next week. We haven't decided what mind model we're teaching next week, but we will keep you posted, but we'll be doing it next week.
Yes, we will.
Good night, guys, and thanks for joining us.
Shout out to EMP, absolutely. So anyway, take care, guys. See you next week.